Welcome to the Givology Impact Series podcast, in which we share the experiences and inspirations of social entrepreneurs and change makers around the world in education. I'm Vandana. Today we are delighted to have Damany Gibbs, Chief Financial Officer of Nova Pioneer Education from South Africa, here as our honored guest. Nova Pioneer Education Group is a Pan-African independent school network offering preschool through secondary education for students from ages 3 through 19. They work to prepare the next generation of leaders and innovators through world-class teaching and methods with an emphasis on 21st century skills. Damany was previously a founding team member of Bain & Company's Africa practice. He previously worked across New York, London, and South Africa for Morgan Stanley. He holds an MBA from Harvard Business School, a master's in Economic and Social History from Oxford University, where he is a Rhodes Scholar, and a BS from Cornell University. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me, Damany.
Sure, happy to.
So can you share with us the story of Nova Pioneer and its founding and mission?
Sure. So quite simply, our mission is to increase access to high-quality education on the continent. And when we break that up into different pieces, I think the access part is quite key, which means, how do we make private education accessible to families? So currently we cater to middle class and emerging middle class families for the most part, and also looking to see how do we make it even more affordable by introducing a model that can be even lower fee. So that's one part of access, the affordability aspect of it, given quality. The perception is that quality private schools on the continent are quite expensive and also difficult to get into. The other part of the access is really around scale and wanting to really reach as many communities as possible. And so we've got a lighthouse goal of 100 schools in 10 years. And this would probably be across Southern Africa, East Africa, and West Africa. And what that allows us to do is to, not just focus on one country, but to really get to this, a scale across, a meaningful scale across 3 regions. And currently we're in South Africa and Kenya to date. And then perhaps the biggest thing really is around what do we mean when we think about quality education. I think this is probably what gets us the most excited about the opportunity, we've been stuck in a very traditional approach to education for quite some time, especially on the continent. And, especially here in Africa, we face a set of unique challenges where the need for innovation and leadership is critical as we think about the next kind of generation of leaders that are going to be shaping the African century. And I think there's been a lot of work done in pockets that really moves away from the traditional approach and focuses on building, the right type of skills, and whether it's focusing on problem solving and critical thinking, or collaboration and leadership that we think are going to be most relevant for the kids of today in their careers and futures of tomorrow. And I think that's really what gets us excited, the opportunity to shape that and be thought leaders and to collaborate with other thought leaders on that. And so I think that's likely going to be our big differentiator, how we're able to achieve that and really move away from a traditional approach to one that is more geared at innovation and leadership.
So Nova Pioneer students excel not only academically, but they also learn to be tomorrow's innovators and leaders, as you mentioned. So can you describe Nova Pioneer's approach to learning and the culture that it fosters?
Yep. So from a learning point of view, there are a couple aspects that we try to focus on. One is a big part of it is character building, and how do we drive that, and that is embodied really in our culture and our 6 culture principles. So culture principles like always growing, solutions first, creative together, servant leadership are kind of become a part of the day-to-day at Nova Pioneer, and that goes from students as young as 3 years old all the way to the teachers and staff. And so that for us is huge because we live and breathe that, and forms a way for us to express ourselves and hold ourselves to high standards, and for the students to use that as almost as a toolkit for how they approach not just life at school, but kind of everyday life. So those are kind of the core building blocks. The other things we do, again, it varies between primary and secondary school, but we try to make the approach to learning more collaborative and more of a facilitation, as opposed to the teacher kind of standing at the front of the classroom and lecturing. So you'll see from the way our classroom spaces are designed, where students sit around tables as opposed to in rows, all the way to the types of activities that happen during the week. So, for example, we have exploration days, where students are, working on projects that are meant to kind of reinforce the concepts, not only reinforce the concepts they're learning in the classroom, but also to really, inspire a sense of curiosity in the students and really build a joy of learning. The other core part of the curriculum is how do we create leadership opportunities for all students, and doing that in a very deliberate way. And again, for us, that means structuring the teaching and learning such that each student either rotates through a leadership role, or we create just more opportunities than you would normally find in a school for leadership across a variety of areas. And having the opportunity for kids that even, like I said, as young as 3 in the pre-primary to participate in some of those, and for students in the secondary, whether it's leading clubs or driving initiatives in their community, to also build those types of skills as well.
Yeah, I think developing a collaborative environment is really important. So one of the key principles of Nova Pioneer's culture, as you mentioned, is promoting the joy of learning. How do you achieve this in your students?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we try to do is to make learning quite practical. And so we try to do a lot more project-based work, and at a younger age, be quite reactive to the interests of the students. So what that means is, it's a little bit harder because a teacher might have a particular curriculum, but it's not set in stone such that they are going to come in and regardless of what the students are interested in, they're just going to teach that curriculum. At Nova Pioneer, there are some things that are created just based, for a given week, for example, just based on the interests of the students. If a student comes in and at a morning meeting, they're talking about, say ants, for example, as a random example. There's an opportunity for the teacher to create a lesson or projects where the kids can go outside and study study some aspects of ants, how they create their homes, why they're so strong, and it really kind of just builds on the curiosity of the students to create lessons around that and to create opportunities for learning around that. And I think if you do that from now at an early age, I think students are rather than being just fed content to digest and to spit back out in exams, they actually are excited about learning and they see it as a lifelong thing. I think the other aspect of creating a joy of learning is, it's not necessarily building a culture such that it's not necessarily about right or wrong answers. but it's about the process to get there. And part of that is allowing the space for students to debate ideas, to challenge each other, respectfully, but not to feel like you're only going to participate if you think you know the answer. But building the confidence to take a chance to learn from being wrong or to learn from failing at things. And I think then you enjoy the process more, because it's not just about if you're wrong then you haven't learned anything, but it's really about how do you really learn from failure, or from that collaborative or debate type of style, versus just telling you what the answer is.
So I think one of the big issues in education today is, how do you challenge high potential students while also providing support for students who might be struggling?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when I grew up I'm originally from Barbados. When I grew up in Barbados, we were streamed quite early on, and so based on how well you did in your exams, you were kind of placed in a class with students of similar ability, or with who had achieved similar scores, and to some extent that was probably easier for the teachers to manage. I think the way Nova Pioneer works, where we are one, you will have students with different abilities in a class, but also we don't want to be overly selective in the students we admit into Nova Pioneer either. And so part of our responsibility is, if a child comes in that is potentially behind, that we're also able to catch them up, which makes our jobs a little bit harder, but it's a great challenge to have. I think one of the big things to solving that is to create the space to have enough individual attention or breakouts to be able to, as you said, if someone has, if there's a high potential student, being able to push and challenge them, and being able to kind of carve out specific exercises or carve out activities for them to do, while still at the same time being able to support students who may be struggling with a particular concept. And one of the ways in which we do that is through teaching teams. And so typically in a class, you've got two teachers. One is what we call an anchor teacher, and then we have a more junior teacher in the class as well. And what that allows us to do is, depending on the activity, we're able to split the groups out. And so you may have a larger group at times working on something, and then one of the teachers is able to spend time with 2 or 3 students, either again pushing and challenging them because they've already mastered some of the concepts and material and are waiting, are hungry to learn more, or vice versa, where you have some students who need to catch up and can use that individual attention. So that's one of the biggest ways, I think, in which we do it through our teaching teams.
So given all the work you do, can you share with us some stories that encapsulate your work and mission?
Absolutely. So I think one of the, it's interesting, one of the biggest pieces of feedback we receive from parents, and we try to create a lot of opportunities to get feedback so that we continue to improve. One of the biggest pieces of positive feedback we've had from parents is just the increase in confidence that their children have had since joining Nova Pioneer. Whether they were shy before, or they weren't comfortable speaking in front of a group, or whatever it is. I think that's one big theme that we've seen that I think for us is a big success story, because I think confidence is in some ways half the battle a lot of times. And so that's one big thing. I think there are other specific stories of certain students. So, for example, in Kenya, there was a student who created an app and won an entrepreneurship contest with that app. In South Africa, there's another student who wrote a book and is, engaged in a variety of different activities around personal growth and development. And again, I think he's only 16 or 17. And so, you have some of those stories where I think it really encapsulates what we hope our students endeavor to become, and that, true kind of innovators and leaders. And it's clearly still very early days, but we imagine, one of the true indicators of success would be if, 15 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, how many of our students are really having an impact or are doing things that are entrepreneurial versus your, kind of regular jobs or careers.
So today's podcast is focused on impact evaluation and assessment. How do you measure your impact in the communities you work with, and what kinds of qualitative or quantitative metrics do you use?
Yep. So from a community point of view, clearly a big impact would be the impact on our students, and their ability to go out and shape their futures. And so that's something that, we're still probably a little ways away from capturing fully in terms of what that looks like. But what we do today really is measure the growth that they're having with us. So based on where you started with us to, after a year, 2 years, 6 months, we do international benchmark testing, I think twice a year, and that allows us to, one, just compare with a high global standard versus just a local standard, and two, it allows us to really get strong data about the growth of students and where we need to double down on support. So I think one big impact area is we've seen strong growth at or above kind of global benchmarks in our students, and I think that has a big impact in the communities and where they're coming from. I think the other big impact is just around job creation. We've since we started, we've created over 300 jobs, in environments where there's a high unemployment rate or high unemployment rate. And so for us, that's been, had a big impact in our communities. And as we continue to grow, we continue to hire more people. So, and the more students we can serve. So we anticipate, within the next 5 to 8 years, being able to serve close to, 20,000 students, and having, over 2,000 jobs created. And so, again, we're a little ways away from that, but I think those are the two big things in terms of impact in the communities, jobs and the growth that our students are having, and the potential for what it means when they can make a difference and make an impact in their communities.
So what are some of the community reactions to your work?
So it's generally been positive. I mean, every time we open a school, we consider the school to be part of the community, and so we would try to, one, even before the school opens, once we know we're going to be in a particular area, meet with the various stakeholders, have everyone learn a bit more about what the school is about and who we are. At times, to be honest, right at the beginning, there's always some hesitancy because sometimes folks just don't want change in the community. And sometimes, when folks think of a school, they think about traffic, or they think about, other things that just disrupt the, kind of the norm of how they've been living. But it's been amazing. I think once we've been able to engage with people and folks get a better sense of what we're doing. The response has been quite fantastic, and we've hosted community events on campus. We allow communities to use the facilities for events, whether sports or religious services from time to time. So we see ourselves really as trying to integrate into the community, and I think it's been a very positive engagement thus far.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. So as you look into the next 3 to 5 years, what are your goals for Nova Pioneer Education?
So I think the biggest thing for us really that will drive success is people. And so I think as we look at all these other goals of reaching more students and delivering a high quality education, it all comes back down to, do we have the right people in place, and are we providing them with the right level of development to be successful and grow and lead in their roles. And so for us, that's one of the biggest things that we want to get right, and is number one on our list for success. The second thing is really the intertwined very closely, but the results of our students. How are students doing? And the next 5 years we'll have a lot more data. We'll learn a lot more. We will continue to learn and adapt. And I think really seeing strong growth, continuing to see strong growth in our students, and more examples of those types of success stories that we spoke about earlier is absolutely critical. And then I think the third is more of an enabler, but important nonetheless, is just from a business and scaling perspective, ensuring we've got the right systems and processes in place that allow us to focus our energy and efforts really on the things that matter. And so in the next 2 to 3 years is really about getting those things in place pretty quickly, such that when we hit another inflection point from a growth point of view, that things don't break, right? Or they may stretch, which is fine, but they don't break. And so those are kind of 3 critical pillars, I think, that we're going to be focusing on over the next 5 years, and I think we're going to be critical to getting to that lighthouse goal in 10 years.
So lastly, how can our listeners get involved?
Great question. I think one of the things we pride ourselves on is being a school for global citizens. And so we try to host different speakers or different mentorship programs. So there's always a way to get involved, whether you're passing through South Africa or you would love the opportunity to speak to our students, which we can facilitate over a video call. So that's one, I think, thing that's hopefully pretty easy, but has high impact on our students, and just the exposure that they can get to to different fields or to different regions that they wouldn't have normally been familiar with. The other thing we're trying to do is raise funds to support more scholarships, because at this point we don't have even though we're a for-profit, we don't have the capital to provide meaningful financial aid as yet. And so we love the opportunity to be able to provide more scholarships for students who are really high potential but can't afford our fees. And so each year we hold fundraising efforts that are usually centered around a big challenge. So last year, for example, it was Kilimanjaro for the kids, where members of our team, both in South Africa and Kenya, climbed Kilimanjaro. And then this year is kilometers for the kids. So in each region, the teams are going to run a marathon, half marathons and marathons. And those funds will go towards scholarships, but they'll also go towards some STEM initiatives, like maker spaces and so on that are consistent with kind of the theme of innovation. And so that's another way to get involved from a contribution point of view, to support some of those initiatives as well. And I'd say the third is really just thought partnership. So if there are any ideas, whether it's around technology or things that you've seen that you think would resonate with us or would have an impact on the students, we are always eager to learn, and super excited about education, and would love if anyone has ideas about what we can do better. Would love to hear those as well. I think those are a couple of ways in which listeners can get involved in a very meaningful way.
So thank you so much for taking the time to participate in our Impact Series podcast. We are really excited to continue following Nova Pioneer and the developments to come. Awesome.
Thanks so much for having me, and hope it was a great listen. Thanks for the support and the kind words of encouragement.